Hi, friends, it's Sarah, the Fat Culture Critic. So recently, we all learned that Andy Weir, writer of Project Hail Mary and The Martian, and Artemis, though I haven't read that one, we learned he has some pretty not great politics and some really bad political instincts. And I think it's an interesting topic to talk about and think through. But um, ultimately, my conclusion, my sort of thesis, is that him having bad politics isn't actually all that important. I certainly don't think it should stop us from enjoying the film. I haven't watched the film yet, for the record. I listened to the audiobook and loved it. I'm looking forward to seeing the film, but I haven't gotten out to the cinema yet. And I've read The Martian and watched it, and I really enjoyed it. I personally, I think that he is a very good writer at what he does. He is correct that he doesn't write mass, very, very social commentary stuff. There is politics in his writing, whether he intends to or not, because there's always politics. But yeah, he writes sort of science-based space adventures, and they're really enjoyable. And we all need some fun, and I think they're also really hopeful, which is also a political act in these times, and I think an important one. But he has made some statements that are good. And I think we there's some interesting stuff to talk about in sort of how he views his art, and also like the wider discourse. So this all came out because he made the decision to go on a podcast with a guy named Critical Drinker. This is a choice that a person can make. I do not know why they would want to do it, but he did. So there. So who is Critical Drinker? Well, I actually don't want to go a huge amount into it. He's kind of another one of the sort of Ben Shapiro's from Timu. You know, a culture critic from the right who doesn't like any diversity in his media or anything written with empathy. From what I can tell, he was one of the folks who were making really horrendous comments about Star Trek Academy, and yeah, it seems like a thoroughly unpleasant person. Although I'm not really in a position to know that. I just think that his contribution to the media landscape is pretty odorous, and I think that going on his show is a bad choice. When you have the kind of platform that having a major film in the box office, when you're given that kind of clout, it's a really irresponsible use of it to raise up someone of Critical Drinker's ilk. I think that's a really irresponsible decision, but people make irresponsible decisions. It's not the end of the world. I don't think we should not watch the film or anything. It's just, yeah, I don't want to gloss over the fact that is a really irresponsible use of clout. But sometimes people make bad choices, and I think we have a tendency sometimes. We do sometimes have a tendency to want to put people on one team or another and sort of simplify good, bad, whatever. And I think that was particularly encouraged because some of the statements he made on that podcast were taken out of context by right-wing media who do what they do and want to stoke a culture war. They claim that he had said that succeeding because it didn't cater to the woke political agenda. which is an out of it's an out of context take, which got taken out of context by social media as we do. Um, that's the thing. Um, I've done that myself. I didn't really engage with it a lot this time around, but I've made that mistake too of taking things out of context and running with them. It's something that I think the platform really encourages us to do. All of these social platforms, and just the thing we do in Discourse. So yeah, there's a lot of irresponsibility around, but we're trying to get through 2026, and sometimes irresponsible decisions happen. So I want to try and have some empathy for because it's just better to try and be empathetic. But the thing that was taken out of context was him talking about how he doesn't believe he puts social commentary in his work. He doesn't intend to be political. Um, he just wants to write a fun story. And I believe that that is what he intends. But the thing about politics is it happens whether you intend it or not. Your opinions end up in your work, whether you intend them or not. Especially if you don't think them through, then your unconscious stuff will end up in your writing, and that's not always a bad thing. Not always. It's kind of that's just a very humany thing. Some of the best work was written by people who weren't necessarily thinking about the implications of their work. I don't think that Jane Austen was thinking a huge amount about patterns of hierarchy and and privilege. She was thinking her thoughts were more along sort of the frustrations with her society and the marriage market stuff. But when I read it, I read so much more into it because I'm bringing myself to what she wrote, and she's bringing her world, and in between, a lot of ideas come out, and that's part of the joy of reading things critically or even just engaging with work. Is the author always brings parts of themselves into their work, and the reader always brings themselves into their work. And so it is a co creative process, which is why I think I like to take a bit of a complicated view of death of the author. Death of the author is sometimes misused to say, like, I can still love a thing even with a problematic person wrote it. And, well, I mean, it depends. I think that's a complicated thing, but really what it's about is saying that the author is dead to the text. That once the text is complete, any thoughts the writer has about the text are irrelevant because their job is done. And that we shouldn't, and also that we shouldn't read anything autobiographical into the work because the work is the work, the text is all that matters. And I'm not 100% on board with the text is all that matters, but I think the text is a lot of what matters. And I do think sort of the world that the author lives in can be really interesting to think about when you're reading a book. One of the reasons why I love period pieces. And I think it would be silly to try and read Project Hail Mary without taking into account the world that we are currently in, that it was written in. Um, Even though that we don't want that to be the whole of how we read it. So politics will always be in the work, and it's a foolish thing to say that you didn't put politics in your work. You may not have intended to, but you did. But sometimes writers are foolish. Sometimes humans are foolish, and not. It's sometimes really good work comes from people who aren't necessarily thinking critically about what they're putting in. Because sometimes people are thinking too critically about putting the social commentary in, can be a bit too on the nose. And there's an art to being didactic, and there's an art to trying to put social commentary in without feeling like you're at a political science lecture. And that's not Andy Weir's wheelhouse. His wheelhouse is giving us a vast amount of science information without making us feel like we're at a science class. Though you sometimes will feel a little like a science class, but it's kind of like a fun science class. So, so Especially this one because the character is a teacher. So it sort of feels kind of natural for his voice to be teaching us science, if that makes sense. Anyway, so these comments are kind of not great. He also talked about Star Trek and being rejected for running a Star Trek show. He was rather rude to fellow writers, and that is something that he has tried to apologize for, but it's kind of a lackluster apology. He's kind of showing himself up to be very basic, basic white guy, which can be worse. But yeah, so he said that he prefers Star Trek not do social commentary, but just do kind of shoot him up with Romulans and that, and kind of shows why he didn't get put in charge of a Star Trek show. He could probably write a very good episode, because I don't think every episode of Star Trek has to be consciously social commentary. And I think he could write an interesting episode, and then you have, I think it's kind of the responsibilities of the showrunners to look at it and take a critical look to it and see if it's having any messages that they don't want to be associated with Star Trek. And that's why he shouldn't be in a showrunner position for that, because that requires more conscious political and social commentary thinking than to write an episode. So let's talk about his politics. He's presented himself as being apolitical, and that there's no such thing really. When someone says they're apolitical, especially in a world like this, what they're kind of indicating is that they're rather complacent. And from what the statements he's made and the actions he's taken, I think complacency is kind of the word of the summation here. He's a person who appears to hit all the privilege bingo cards, all the default settings. That the world that we currently live in holds up as more proximate to power. He's white. He's American. He's straight, as far as I know. He appears to be able-bodied. Cisgendered. That's all the sort of like the markers of that are proximate to power that are seen as the defaults. And when someone who is in that position is complacent, that is in itself kind of center right, especially in a fascist society. And America is definitely a fascist society at the moment. And yeah, that is complacency is unhelpful to people who are struggling. It is a luxury that few people have. You only have the luxury to be complacent if you do have most of the bingo card covered. These days, the work has been done enough that people can have one or two of the things that are a bit off the less proximate to power indicators, and still be relatively complacent. And usually by not thinking about the work of the people who got them there. And I do have some empathy for the people who are complacent, because if you're doing well, you kind of want to think that the reason that you're doing well is because of your hard work. Meritocracy is a really nice story. It's a lie, but it's a really nice story. The reason I say it's a lie, like, it would be really nice to think that the people who had the most merit, who were the best at stuff, were would be the ones who would be in charge. But the thing is, there is no way to measure merit, but you can measure money and you can measure power in certain circumstances. So what you end up happening is the sort of it's cart before the horse, where you can't measure merit, but you can measure money. So someone who has a lot of money is assumed to have the merit without evidence of actual merit or ability, and you usually don't find that out until they fuck it up. um, and that is kind of how a lot of the situation of the world is. Problems right now is that, but it is natural to, if you have success, to want to tell yourself a story about how you earned that success, and you may have earned a lot of it because in his case he is a very good writer, um, of sort of popular fiction, fun stories to read. He has some serious skills that he has clearly worked to hone, and so yeah. The thing is that what you don't see is all of the people who also had those serious skills but didn't have the context, or whose writing wasn't as accessible for the people who are making the choices. Because the people, there's kind of a tendency among people to lift up people, to relate to people who look like them, and to be more naturally inclined to the people who look and live like them. Uh, it's part of the reason why we have diversity programs and things, is to try and combat that. But that is the thing that has happened for generations, and so I understand why people want to feel like their hard work uh, is the reason that they succeeded and that they have merit. Um, and it's definitely part of it, and I'm sure you do have merit, but merit can't be measured. Money can. So yeah, I think his politics isn't great. It's complacent and uh, yeah, but I don't really think it's actively harmful either. We do talk about silence being compliance, and that's true, but complacency doesn't necessarily make you an opponent to progress. Um, and I think when we're talking about how much harm or benefit a person does, um, I don't think that his mediocre politics really does much harm. And I think if we look, and I do actually think the books, there is some good to be found in there. There is some good politics to be found in there, even though he didn't intend it to. There's some mixed politics actually. And I think it's kind of, I wanted to kind of a bit of a take a minute to do a bit of a political breakdown on Project Hail Mary, because I think it's hilarious that he thinks it isn't political. Um, what he means, I think, is that he didn't deliberately, do. I'm going to make politics. There's no elections in there. There is actually a moment where they talk about diversity, ironically, and it's a weird moment because it has a woman arguing um, against diversity, and saying, like, it's when they're choosing the crews for the flights, for the Project Hail Mary. Uh, Strat, who is the sort of in charge lady, and I'll get to her in a minute. Um, she doesn't want. She wants all men. She wants all heterosexual men, so there won't be any romantic tension. If I were choosing people to do a big, complicated mission, I don't think I'd choose all heterosexual men. I don't, I don't think that would be the best way to have no tension. Um, I don't know. I mean, one, you don't necessarily know that they actually are all heterosexual, and you as entertaining as heated rivalry in space could be, that's a different that's a different film. But even if they were all heterosexual, uh, the fact that a woman would think that all boys was the best choice to not have tension. Um, has she met men? Yeah, I think that uh, the gender and is not like the way to. You got to choose based on personality. I think it was a really strange moment in the book. I felt for a woman to suggest that having all heterosexual men would be no tension. But anyway, um, for a guy to write a woman saying she doesn't want women, it's a weird moment. But I'm not gonna judge him too harshly because it's just one weird. I'm not gonna judge him any harsher than I already. I think judging him as being kind of like complacent, mediocre white man who's very talented in very specific ways. I think that's a pretty humany level. But anyway, talking about the politics in the book. Other than that, so the book is kind of split into two parts. There is the part where they go into where Grace is in space, and the part when he's on the ground when they're creating Project Hail Mary. There are two dominating political ideas, I think, in both that are emergent from each. I don't think they were intended, but I do consider them emergent. And one is on Earth, there is this figurative Strahd who is a benevolent dictator. It's never listed that way, but she is a figure who is given the power by all the countries in the world to make all the decisions and decide everything, including for our protagonist, with unlimited resources, and she can cut through all the red tape and make all the decisions and do anything she wants. With a couple a couple limitations. Oh, when it's dramatically interesting. Um, no, I think it's an interesting choice to write a character like that. I think it's because I think clearly Weir is not remotely interested in the politics that it would take to actually build this thing. He's much more interested in the science. And there's some interpersonal, like office politics kind of stuff thrown in there, but not like the world politics that would take to actually build the thing. So there are some interesting choices, like they pave the Sahara Desert in order to make enough stuff of the fuel that they need to make this happen. And the like the whole conceit is that the world is going to end because there is sun eating bacteria, and so they have to put together a mission, which is the Hail Mary, um, named I'm assuming for the football maneuver, um, the last ditch possible could winner take all stakes if you get it right, but if you don't, then everything's a failure and the human race is a goner. That would have some serious political impact. And he doesn't really want to deal with that. That sort of would be a different story. So he creates this figure of Strat to be given all the power to do all the things. And she's kind of like Earth principal, like school principal, but for all of Earth, all of humanity. Kind of the she's a benevolent dictator. um, and in the story, it nicely sidesteps having to think about diplomacy and finances and all of that, and just kind of have this one woman, and we can debate her choices, and I think that would be a really interesting political discussion, separate from the book, like her choices. But I think it's important to recognize when you're reading or watching this that figure of the benevolent dictator is every bit as much of fiction, every bit as much of a fantasy as the alien species we could talk to. because people don't work that way. Power doesn't work that way. There have very occasionally in history been people who amassed a huge amount of power and didn't abuse it. Very, 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 very occasionally. But also, what history tends to show us is that those people die, and if those power systems aren't dismantled, somebody else will use them and abuse them. Because most humans are kind of assholes when they have power. It's a question of, does power corrupt or does power reveal? And what it reveals is that most people are kind of messy and not good with power. At least the people who get power tend not to be good at, being nice people. Occasionally it does happen. One figure from history that I've always kind of found fascinating is the Italian freedom fighter Garibaldi. Not that Garibaldi, but the Italian figure Garibaldi. He amassed a vast amount of power, uniting Italy into one kingdom, and then decided to go retire and farm goats. I think that's kind of a neat choice. The problem is that history keeps going after you retire to farm goats, and Mussolini steps in, and yeah, you get Mussolini. So the idea that you can have a benevolent dictator, you can have someone with all the power to do all the things and not have it have consequences, is a way to skip a bunch of stuff that the writer didn't want to deal with, but it is also not realistic in the least. And there's no way to say that that's not political, because it is kind of a libertarian fever dream to imagine, what if you could cut through all the red tape and just have one sensible person make all the decisions? And they'd make all the right ones. there, there are a lot of people who kind of like that idea. Um, and unfortunately, those people vote. So putting that idea into the world is political. And so it's okay to write that, but we also it's useful to think about it critically, to remind ourselves that that is not a doable thing. Terry Pratchett, who also wrote a benevolent dictator, but he made the point that that is fantasy and impractical and only happens in that story because of the particular autistic character of the patrician. And it's just kind of who the patrician is, that he can do that, but also like others have been terrible. But he talked about how there's an inherent weakness in humanity and our tendency to bend at the knee. It's not true of all humans. A lot of people also have an automatic sort of oppositional defiance disorder response to any to any and all authority, which is one of the reasons why a benevolent dictator is impossible. But yeah. Anyway, I would not say that the choice to include that in a book is apolitical. I can get why not thinking terribly critically about the politics you're doing can land you with that character. But that's why we should be reading critically, whether or not we write critically. So there's that. Other political aspects. There is also the main story is hopeful, because it is the idea of the world coming together to fix a seemingly impossible crisis, and it has a happy ending, and so that is hopeful. And I think to choose to be hopeful in this world we live in is itself a political act. It's the more, I would say that the more disenfranchised, the more marginalized person you are, the bigger an act of resistance being hopeful is. But the idea of people coming together being hopeful, the idea of trusting experts being hopeful, is political, because that is another thing. It is, unfortunately, arguing for the importance of expertise in 2026 in America, well, even in arguing from Canada, we still have to make the point that arguing for the importance of expertise, valuing education, these are political. Kind of wish they weren't, but they are. And that's a political stance on which I agree with him. And I think that intentional or not, his in belief in science is probably the most important, the strongest aspect of his work. Um, and it's one of the things I really loved about The Martian is how much the science is valued, even though I'm not a science, but like a lot of my family are, because they're medical, and yeah, like the importance of science, and science not as like this sort of magic force that has all the answers, or an ideology you believe in, but a system of experimentation, of understanding you can be wrong about things, a system of trial and error. And like also The Martian is also really hopeful about people coming together, working together. It is it's an instance of the needs of the one outweighing the needs of the many. It's a very Star Trek thing, and it's because the many choose to help the one. So I would say that is a very political stance, and one I one I wish was more popular. And I think embedding that in something that is so fun and adventurous and not threatening to the people who see themselves as who not threatening to someone like Critical Drinker, like embedding that kind of messaging, is itself a political act, whether you consciously are aware of or not. But making science appealing to the general public is a political act, and an important one. I think in terms of the weighing harms versus benefits, I would put that squarely in the benefit column of his work. Um, even if the promoting the benevolent dictator trope is a bit dodgy and could be a bit dangerous, the promoting the idea of trusting science, definitely in the win column. And then the other very political element of the story, which makes me laugh so hard when they say that it's not serving a woke agenda, is that a massive part of Project Hail Mary is that Grace, the human astronaut, has to work together with an alien who is so different from him, a being so different from him that they cannot even breathe the same air. But they must learn to communicate with one another, and they must learn to work together with one another, and they each bring strengths the other doesn't have. They each have knowledge the other doesn't have, and they have to learn to communicate with one another on their own terms, and build this quite beautiful friendship, actually, across differences. And that, friends, that is the woke agenda. Seriously. um, the thing that they are always complaining about, what diversity, equity, inclusion is, despite the fact that it unfortunately gets filtered a lot through management speak that spoils everything. But the idea of diversity is really about how we all have something to give. We all have knowledge that the others don't have. We all have all of our different walks of life, all of our different perspectives are valuable, and have things to bring to one another. And if we can find a way to all be at the table together, we can build a better humanity. Not by if we break down hierarchies and stop trying to look for what stop trying to measure merit. An impossible feat. Stop trying to do hierarchies and kind of learn to cooperate and to see one another as we are and treat one another as people. And not in the sort of there's an annoyance of colorblind way of like, if I see what is like me in you. No, you also have to see what is unlike me. I need to see what is unlike me in you and learn to value that. If find a way to do both, this is why the project of trying to bring us all, to have everyone come to the table, does require us breaking down the table and building a new one where we can all be. And I know that is difficult for people who feel complacent, who have power in the system as it is now. I understand why that feels threatening. But as someone who values science, I would suggest to Weir that he thinks about what it is to change a paradigm. And I think that even though he doesn't think he's being political, the messages that he's put in, there is a lot of good there. There is the essential of what we're looking for when we're looking for diversity. Is we're looking for a way to value everyone and have everyone bring themselves, all of themselves, because all of us are all humans and all of us are part of humanity and all of our differing experiences are important. And you never know, when you value one over another, that's skewing the science. That's ruining the experiment. If we think of all of humanity as an experiment, to prioritize one over another, it's the thing where the observer changes the observed. This is bringing bias into it, and we're trying to take bias out of it, but that is kind of a destructive to lead to creative. And that's part of science, is you have to break down your preconceptions in order to do better science, to come up with the truth, to come up with knowledge. And that is what, in a cultural way, that is what we're trying to do when we're doing cultural criticism, when we're doing what they see as woke ideology. Like, that is some of the fundamentals of queer theory and Derrida and postmodernism and all of the stuff. We're kind of doing science on ideas. We're kind of breaking down and doing on culture to try and experiment and look at who we are when we try and correct for the biases, and we try and understand one another. And yeah, it's a real shame that so much of it gets filtered through sort of management business covering their ass kind of thing. And so to a lot of people, they learn about ideas about diversity and stuff through really boring management seminars. But that's not what it really is. What it really is trying to understand one another as humans, and that as people. Presently humans is the only sentient life we know of, so we say humans, but until we know better. And I actually think that messaging, whether it was intended, which he seems to think it wasn't, the messaging of needing to work together and needing to work across differences and finding friendship in someone who is totally different from you and learning to speak their language, learning to love what is different about them and what is similar about them. Like, that's actually really important and useful and does a lot of good. More harm than in the scheme of things, that I think that his writing, his work, is doing more good than bad. And even if his politics is mediocre, and even if he's making rather, well, thoughtless and irresponsible choices in terms of platforming uh, trolls, um, still the book is worth our reading and thinking about. Um, and thinking, it's our job as readers to think about it critically and to think about the politics, even if the writer isn't necessarily considering it their job to think about the politics when they're writing it. Maybe it would be nice if he did do some self analyzing. Maybe the next book would be better, or maybe it wouldn't be. Being a good writer and having good politics uh, aren't necessarily this connected. So I think it's right to criticize his rather thoughtless, lackluster politics. But we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We shouldn't throw the book out with the author. But there are some times we should throw the book out with the author. So can you hear her coming? Whether we want to or not. There is a specter that haunts discourse around authors and politics. There is a person that we have to talk about, even though we don't want to talk about her. Right? Bloody J.K. Bloody Rowling. Joanne. So, having just talked about how kind of Weir's political statements and actions kind of are, even though, and then said that despite that, the book is good. The book has good things to say, and that we should not throw out the baby with the bathwater. Why, oh why, is it different with Joanne? Yeah. Why is it worth throwing everything out with her and all of Harry Potter? Even though, to be honest, I think there's some excellent ideas in her books. There's a lot of bad ones as well. And, oh, so much anti-fat bias, so much, so much, so much heteronormativity. But there was also, ideas about the power of friendship and coming together to defeat fascism and how it must be fought. And I think there were definitely some good things in that book, the book series. But it is so far outweighed by the harm that she does and continues to do to one of the most vulnerable populations on Earth, trans people. Her behavior has been absolutely horrendous. She takes money that she receives from anything Potter related and she uses it to help people sue trans people, to help people to legally fund changing the definition of gender. She became kind of a meme for transphobes to out themselves by saying they stood with J.K. Rowling. And she moved into that space and owned it and has fully gone down the rabbit hole, and she just doing harm continuously and constantly. She has and continues to do so much harm. And the thing is that while some authors can do harm and you can still sort of love their books and kind of just approach it critically, you can love Potter, you can read Potter, but because it's become such a symbol of transphobia such a meme, such a thing, that to bring in any relevance in the public sphere, to talk about it uncritically, to contribute financially to Rowling's uh, war chest for attacking trans people by buying anything Potter related, um, or by giving it social capital by keeping it in the public sphere in any sense other than to criticize her, um, which is the only way I'll mention her is to argue for yes, to point out the her transphobia and that we must not give her any quarter in the discourse other than to um, argue against her. Don't don't wear her merch in public. Don't read the books in public. Don't buy anything connected to them. Don't watch this stupid new TV series, which also looks really derivative. It just looks. There's no ad. There's no ad. Nothing adding to it. And don't buy the Audible books. Just don't contribute to her, please. I mean, you do you. If you, at the end of the day, if you want to do any of that stuff, um, that is your choice. But you then have to accept responsibility that you are contributing to harm to trans people. And if that's something that you want to do, why are you on my page? I want nothing to do with you. You can make any choice you want as long as you accept responsibility for your actions, and that means that you are accepting that the consequences of your actions for in any way holding Rowling up or spending money on something connected to her or anything like that, the consequences are we're gonna think you're an asshole. We're gonna think you don't care about vulnerable people because clearly you don't. If a little bit of inconvenience to you outweighs the harm that she does people and that people do in using her name, you will be judged by your words and actions. Those are your words and actions. Anything people think of you as a result of them is his consequences. So yeah, and I don't, and nothing that Weir has said or done in any way approaches that. His politics are kind of lackluster. He's not very responsible with his how he handles his clout. These are kind of normal mediocrity. I'm probably not always as responsible as I could be. I can try and do better. It'd be nice if he decided to try and do better. But even if he doesn't, I don't think it outweighs the good that's in the books. But if he continues uh, to lend clout to people like Critical Drinker, I'm going to be less inclined to read his books. That's just kind of a reasonable response, I think, to his words and actions. Just like, although I think at one point he might have written a decent Star Trek episode because he was an asshole about Star Trek. I think he's blotted his coffee book on that. Yeah, that is the consequences of his action. And so, yeah, I think Discourse was discoursing and taking things out of context and then out of contexting them more. And that happens. But I think it's important that we then take some time to think things through and not be like, now we need to dump this guy just because he's got some kind of irresponsible actions and ideas. Um, we just also maybe don't celebrate it. Maybe we go, we like the work. Go back and do the work. You're good at writing the sciencey stuff. You're not so good at doing the talky talk. Maybe leave the talky talk to somebody else. Anyway, that's enough of me doing the talky talk. Anyway, that's me. That's my thoughts on that. Thanks as always to my Patreon supporters. I appreciate you all. There, if you want to add your name to them, then there's a way that you can do that, and I would appreciate it. As to other things, I have recorded a great conversation about joy with Aronok, whose work you should all go see. They have an episode about Mario coming out. This sounds really neat. And I'll hopefully have that edited and out for you soon. It was a bit of a chaotic conversation, so the edit is proving fantastic. I might just end up having it be chaotic, and hopefully it's interesting, creative chaos. So that's look for that soon. Also, April is my birthday month. So last year I did a whole thing where I read Pride and Prejudice live every day for the month of April. And this year I'm doing the same thing, but I'm doing it with Persuasion, which is actually my favorite Jane Austen. So I will be live reading with some funny voices for the month of April. I love doing the obnoxious voices, and I need to find a fun voice for Sir Walter Elliot. So yeah, that should be fun. But generally, take care of yourselves and be kind to yourselves, and don't get too lost in the discourse. And try to find some joy.